Welcome to Sunday Morning Cafe, where we've been having an ongoing conversation on what grows resilience and how it is that we can get through these challenging times with a measure of grace, a measure of humor, with compassion for ourselves and others, and a great deal of solidarity with one another. Today, I'd like to reach way back to the seminal thinking of the founder of resilience research in modern psychology, Dr. Viktor Frankl. On my way to getting there, I'd like to share with you a story that maybe you've heard before. It's a story about a guy that goes to work every day, and every day at lunchtime, he does the same thing with his colleague. He eats lunch. He pulls out his paper bag, he reaches into that paper bag, and he pulls out his sandwich, and every day he says the same thing. Peanut butter again. Well, his friend's watching this over and over again, and so finally he can't stop himself from doing it. He says, I notice this thing that you do every day. I mean, has it occurred to you you could just ask your wife not to make you peanut butter sandwiches? And the guy looks up and he says, wife, I don't have a wife. I make those sandwiches. What resilient people know is if you don't ask yourself what you want on a regular basis, you're always just going to get peanut butter. Resilient people know how to ask themselves, what do I want? Let me put that a different way. Here's something Viktor Frankl noticed. His, what they call the second school of psychology, which is existential psychology, he's the founder of it. And his ideas took shape in the death camps of Nazi Germany all those years ago. What he noticed in himself and others is that despite the fact that everyone had the same terrible rations of food, there was disease outbreaks all over the place and never enough warm clothing to get through. Despite all that, there were some who would tend to survive and live longer and better than those who didn't. And what he noticed over and again, time and time again, was that those who had a sense of purpose and meaning toward which they were living tended to survive way better. And that is what kicked off his form of psychotherapy, existentialist psychology. So the question that comes from his research that got this whole ball rolling of resilience research is, what is that thing in your life that gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning? That's one exercise I'd like you to engage in this week. And here's the thing. Existentialist psychologists would say that that answer will evolve over time. So if you've answered it one time in your life, it can evolve and change to a really different time in your life. Why, across the street here a couple weeks ago, I have family of a teenager that just turned 13, put out great effort to make sure that that didn't get jumped over, but created this lovely party where people would drive by, they would take up a parking place 20 feet away from somebody else. Their answer to that question of when they have a family with teenagers, and it's a really different answer than tomorrow when I go to that little parade of the 5-year-old. They're answering that question of what gives my life meaning a very different way. So the thing is to ask that question early and often. What gives me purpose? What gives me meaning? And articulate that. The second thing is to find those activities that connect with that thing that gives you purpose and meaning. Let me give you for instance. Lynn is someone whose daughter works on the front lines and therefore has contact with people with COVID. Now, she's noticing that she and her colleagues are washing their hands so much that their hands are raw. And that's when Lynn had the light bulb moment and said, hey, I sell Mary Kay products. So she purchased 12 sets of hand restore sets, and she gave those away to her daughter and her colleagues. That connected to Lynn's sense of meaning. Her sense of meaning is not to give away hand products to people. There's a deeper sense of meaning, but this expresses it. And in expressing it, it confirms her in that sense of what gives her meaning. Let me tell you about Kalini. She's adopted a village in a rainforest in northern Brazil where COVID is rampant and hunger is rampant. So she had a bright idea to get together with her mom, and they started sewing masks. And they found others who wanted to sew masks, and they're selling those masks online. And the money they've raised up till today has fed 50 families. here's something less dramatic, but nonetheless something that connects to somebody's sense of meaning. I know a dad who noticed that he was a little short with his family too often. And so he determined that on the way home from work, when he hits a landmark, he's going to start changing his viewpoint so that when he walks to the door, he'll provide a burst of delight for each one of his children and his spouse. So when he walks to the door, his face is ready to show delight, his words are ready to show delight, and there's usually a hug in there for somebody. That 30-second burst of delight has the power to change a family. Now, is that his whole purpose in a nutshell? No, but it connects to his sense of purpose and meaning. I'd like to shift gears and tell you a story from that movie Shawshank Redemption that I think has been showing on some cable network now twice a week for maybe 15 years. It might as well have been written by Viktor Frankl. It's that scene where, well, you know how the movie works. Andy Dufresne, played by Tim Robbins, he is jailed for a murder he doesn't commit. He's a model prisoner, so he gets the model job in the prison to be in charge of the prison library, and he writes note after note asking for donations. He doesn't get donations until finally he does, and a couple semis pull up, and he's unloading these donations for the library. In the course of doing that, he pulls out the prize above all other prizes. Here it is, an album of a Mozart aria. And he just lovingly wipes the dust off that cover. And then you watch the light bulb come up over his head. And he gets an idea, and he takes that album and he takes off running all the way to the prison PA system. He shuts and he locks the door behind him. He puts that record on the turnstile, puts the needle down on it, puts the gooseneck mic down on it, and now the whole prison is hearing this gorgeous Mozart aria, and Andy Dufresne is in seventh heaven just swaying to the music, and he's lost in it, so much so that he doesn't hear the guard banging on the door with his billy club. He doesn't hear it when the guard bursts through the door by breaking the glass, until he's knocked over the head unconscious and dragged to solitary confinement, a place they call the hole. Cut away to the next scene, and now he's getting out of solitary confinement, out of the hole, coming to lunch to meet his friends, where there's Morgan Freeman, who is, the character's name is Red, who is his best friend. And he says, "Oh, how's your time in the hole?" Andy says, "Best time I ever did." Red goes, "Best time you ever did? Hole's never easy." And he said, "Well, I had Mozart with me." "They let you keep a record player in there?" No, I had it in here. I had Mozart in here." And with that, his buddies at the lunch table just start cracking up laughing, almost spit milk through their nose. And you watch this Andy Dufresne character get a look of like curiosity and then horror on his face as he regards his colleagues. And he says, "You mean you don't," and he points to his heart, you don't have that?" And he goes on to say, in a place like this, that's so full of cruelty, that's made out of just stone and steel, you gotta have something here, he points to his heart. Something here that they can't take away from you, that they can't even get to, as he points to his heart. That might as well have been written by Viktor Frankl, because that gets to a third exercise. Remember what I said? I'd like you to spend some time asking yourself, what is that main thing that gives me a sense of purpose and meaning? Next question, what are things that I'm doing to express that thing that connects to it? There's a third exercise I want to get to, but before I just flat out say it, I want to tell a story from my life. It's from way back where my 21-year-old son was only maybe 5 years old. He might have been pre-kindergarten or kindergarten, and I had a baby besides and his older sister, and I'm trying to get everybody out the door. You remember what that was like, or maybe some of you were still doing that. And my last nerve was getting stepped on by this little 5-year-old who kept not cooperating with my requests. And I became more and more like that Captain Bligh on Mutiny on the Bounty. And so finally I'm frustrated. And I say, "John Harry, if you don't," and fill in the blank, "if you don't stop that, I'm going to take you by your feet. I'm going to dip you in honey. I'm going to hang you from that light fixture right there, and I'm going to let the bees go on you." And with that, I harumphed back to my task. And I look up, my little 5-year-old smiling ear to ear. And I, with my Captain Bligh look, what are you smiling about? He goes, because I know something. And I said, well, what is it you think you know? He says, I know you're not going to do that. And I said, how can you be so sure? And he said, well, because you've got God in your heart, so you're just going to love me. And I remember thinking, crap, he's right. So that leads to the third exercise that my son at 5 years old kind of hinted at, and that is, what is it that helps you connect to that God in your heart? Bernard Lonergan, that great theologian, called it holy mystery. Martin Buber called it the I-thou place in yourself, where you and that greater being that is the ground and the horizon of your being exists. Thoreau called it the transcendent. What are those things that you do in your life that connects to that thing inside that nobody can take away, that nobody can get to? What grows that for you? What practices do you engage in? What do you do that gets there and grows that place? And that's where I'd like to end our time with those three exercises. What is it that is that sense of purpose and meaning in your life? What are things that you are doing that are expressing that and feeding that? And the third thing, how are you making contact with that God deep within, and what feeds that sense of self? And I'll see you next week as our conversation about resilience continues.